The year was 1990, February 11th, to be exact. The air was thick with anticipation. Thousands gathered outside Victor Verster prison in South Africa. Cameras flashed, hearts raced. The world held its breath. A tall, slender man in his 70s emerged from behind the prison gates, dressed simply in a white shirt and dark pants. His face bore the marks of a long struggle, deep lines, a quiet strength in his eyes, a hint of a smile that carried decades of pain and hope. That man was Nelson Mandela. For 27 years he had been locked away, confined, silenced, broken in body but unyielding in spirit. Today he stepped out a free man, but not just any free man. He was the symbol of resistance, a beacon of hope for millions shackled by the chains of apartheid. He was about to change history forever. But who was this man? How did a simple boy from a small village rise to become one of the most influential figures the world has ever known? How did a prisoner become a president? How did a man consumed by decades of injustice find it in his heart to forgive? And most importantly, what can his story teach us about courage, resilience, and the true meaning of freedom? Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in the tiny village of Mvezo, nestled in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. He was named Rolihlahla, meaning pulling the branch of a tree, or colloquially, troublemaker. Perhaps a fitting name for a boy who would one day challenge the greatest injustice of his time. His father was a local chief and counselor to the Thembu royal family, and Mandela grew up surrounded by stories of leadership, justice, and tribal law. But even in his early years, Nelson witnessed the harsh realities of colonial rule and racial segregation. His education began at a Methodist mission school where he was given the English name Nelson by a teacher. It was a new world, one of classrooms and books, but also a world starkly divided by race. Imagine a young Nelson, curious and bright-eyed, walking the dusty paths between his village and the mission school. Each step was a journey into a future he could barely imagine. A future where Black South Africans were second-class citizens in their own land. But in those early years, Mandela learned the power of knowledge, that education could be a weapon against oppression. He excelled in school, fueled by stories of heroes and freedom fighters. His mind opened to ideas beyond the boundaries of his village. As a young man, Mandela moved to Johannesburg to study law. The city was a world apart, crowded, vibrant, but divided. He saw the brutal realities of apartheid up close, forced removals, racial violence, and laws designed to crush the spirit of Black South Africans. In the courtrooms and streets, Mandela found his calling, to fight for justice and equality. He joined the African National Congress, ANC, a political movement determined to end apartheid and secure equal rights. But the fight was not easy. The government responded to protests with violence and repression. Mandela and his comrades debated how far to go. Should they continue peaceful protests or take up arms? The decision weighed heavily on Mandela's conscience. Could violence be justified in the face of such cruelty? What price would freedom demand? In 1962, Mandela was arrested. The world watched as he stood trial for sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow the government. The courtroom was tense. Mandela was calm but defiant. His speech from the dock echoed through history. "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." What followed were 27 long years behind bars, on Robben Island and other prisons. The conditions were brutal: hard labor, isolation, meager rations, but Mandela never broke. Inside the prison walls, he became a leader, a mentor, and a symbol of unyielding hope. His resilience inspired a growing movement outside, as activists worldwide rallied for his release. As years passed, international pressure mounted. Governments imposed sanctions, artists and activists raised their voices. Mandela's name became synonymous with the struggle for freedom. But still, the South African regime resisted. Then came that unforgettable day in 1990. Mandela walked free, but the fight was far from over. The country teetered on the brink of civil war. Mandela's leadership was tested. Could he guide a divided nation toward peace? Could he forgive those who had imprisoned him? Mandela chose reconciliation over revenge. He worked tirelessly with President F.W. de Klerk to dismantle apartheid and hold the first democratic elections. In 1994, Mandela became South Africa's first black president, a historic moment watched by millions worldwide. Mandela's father, Gadla Henry Mfakanyiswa, was a respected chief but was stripped of his position by the colonial authorities, an early lesson to young Nelson about the ruthless nature of white rule. At 16, Mandela was sent to Healdtown, a prestigious Wesleyan college where he encountered more formal education and began to shape his views on leadership and justice. Despite the privileges of his royal bloodline, Mandela realized that his people lived under constant oppression. They were denied basic human rights, forced into segregated communities, and treated as second-class citizens in their own land. Imagine the confusion and anger of a young man who sees his own people humiliated, their land stolen, and their voices silenced. Mandela's sense of fairness and justice was ignited. Mandela later attended the University of Fort Hare, the only residential university for Black Africans at the time. It was here that Mandela encountered political activism for the first time, joining student protests against discriminatory policies. But a clash with the university authorities over a boycott led to his expulsion, a setback that forced him to rethink his path. Determined to continue his education, Mandela moved to Johannesburg, where he enrolled at the University of South Africa, UNISA, studying law by correspondence. Johannesburg was a harsh city of stark contrasts: wealth and poverty, power and oppression. Mandela found work as a clerk and began to understand the legal system that upheld apartheid. It was in Johannesburg that Mandela met Walter Sisulu, a key ANC leader and mentor. Sisulu introduced Mandela to the African National Congress, planting the seeds for a lifelong commitment to fight apartheid. Mandela's early activism was rooted in nonviolent protest. He helped organize the 1944 Defiance campaign, which encouraged Black South Africans to defy unjust laws through peaceful civil disobedience, but government repression was brutal. Protesters were arrested, beaten, and sometimes killed. Mandela was arrested multiple times. The toll was high, but so was the determination. By the late 1950s, after decades of brutal repression, Mandela and other ANC leaders realized peaceful protest alone would not dismantle apartheid. In 1961, Mandela helped found Umkhonto we Sizwe, Spear of the Nation, the armed wing of the ANC. He believed that sabotage, not violence against people, was a justified means to an end. In 1963, Mandela and his comrades were arrested and charged with sabotage. The trial was a tense, dramatic moment. Mandela's fate and that of South Africa hung in the balance. During the trial, Mandela gave one of the most powerful speeches ever recorded. "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." The courtroom was silent. Mandela's words echoed across the world. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Mandela was sent to Robben Island, a bleak prison off the coast of Cape Town. The conditions were harsh: forced labor, tiny cells, brutal guards. But Mandela found strength in his comrades and his cause. He spent his days breaking rocks in the quarry and his nights studying, teaching, and planning. For Mandela, prison was not the end, but the crucible that forged his resolve. Though cut off from the outside world, his spirit was unbroken. He became a symbol of hope for millions. Outside prison walls, the anti-apartheid movement grew. Countries imposed sanctions. Celebrities and activists raised Mandela's name as a rallying cry. South Africa was increasingly isolated. After 27 years, pressure mounted. In 1990, Mandela was finally released. The country was tense. Would violence erupt? Mandela's leadership was crucial. Mandela chose forgiveness over revenge. He worked with President F.W. de Klerk to negotiate the end of apartheid. Yet the 1994 elections were a test for a fragile nation. Would peace hold? Would people vote for unity? Mandela became South Africa's first black president. When Nelson Mandela arrived on Robben Island, he stepped into what many called the Island of Death. Surrounded by the cold, relentless sea and guarded by ruthless wardens, it was a prison designed to break the spirit of any man. Mandela's cell was no bigger than a small closet, barely enough room to lie down. For 18 hours a day, he was confined to this tiny space. The walls were bare, and the cold seeped into his bones. But worse than the physical hardships was the loneliness, being cut off from his family, from his people, and from the cause he loved. Yet Mandela refused to be broken. Every morning he would rise before dawn and join fellow political prisoners in hard labor, breaking limestone rocks under the scorching sun. The work was brutal, exhausting, and meant to humiliate. But Mandela found meaning even in the smallest acts, sharing words of encouragement, teaching young inmates to read and write, holding on to the vision of a free South Africa. He realized that their imprisonment was not just a punishment, but a test of their will, a test they had to pass for the future of their country. Despite being behind bars, Mandela's mind was free. He studied law, politics, history, and philosophy through smuggled books. He wrote letters and speeches that would eventually inspire millions. In one of his darkest moments, when guards tried to silence his spirit, Mandela famously said, "I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." Back outside, the world was watching. The international community could no longer ignore the horrors of apartheid. Movements sprang up across continents, in the streets of New York, London, Paris, and Sydney, demanding Mandela's release and an end to racial segregation. Countries imposed economic sanctions on South Africa. Artists and athletes boycotted the country. Every news headline reminded the world of Mandela's courage and the brutality of apartheid. Yet the South African government held tight. Behind the scenes, political tension simmered. The government faced pressure not only from the outside, but from growing unrest inside South Africa. Violent clashes, protests, and strikes erupted. The white minority rulers realized that change was inevitable. Would they release Mandela and negotiate peace, or would they tighten their grip and push the nation toward civil war? Even in isolation, Mandela was a leader. He communicated with ANC members outside and inside prison, shaping strategies and plans for a democratic South Africa. Fellow prisoners looked up to him as a beacon of hope. His dignity in suffering became a powerful symbol. Imagine enduring nearly 3 decades confined, knowing your family ages without you, your country suffers, and your personal dreams fade into the distance. Yet Mandela never lost hope. This kind of sacrifice is unimaginable to many but necessary to change history. By 1990, the world had changed. Apartheid was unsustainable. Under rising pressure, South African President F.W. de Klerk took a bold step. On February 11, 1990, Mandela was freed. When the prison gates opened, Mandela stepped into sunlight after 27 years. The crowd outside erupted in cheers, but Mandela remained calm and composed. He knew the real battle was just beginning. Reconciliation was not guaranteed. Tensions between black and white South Africans were raw. Some feared retaliation. Violence flared. Mandela worked tirelessly to calm fears on both sides. He reached out to white South Africans, urging forgiveness, unity, and a shared future. Negotiations were fraught. At any moment, talks could collapse, plunging the nation into chaos. But Mandela's leadership was steady and patient. He understood that peace demanded patience, courage, and compromise. On April 27, 1994, South Africa held its first democratic elections, the first where citizens of all races could vote. Millions lined up, hopeful and anxious. The world watched breathlessly. When the results came in, Mandela was elected the country's first black president. His acceptance speech was humble yet powerful. Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another. Nelson Mandela's election as South Africa's first black president was not just a political victory. It was a profound moment of hope for millions. Mandela's leadership style was unique. He combined firm resolve with deep compassion. He prioritized healing a nation torn apart by decades of racial hatred. Mandela understood that lasting peace required truth and forgiveness. He established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, chaired by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. This bold initiative gave victims a voice and offered amnesty to perpetrators who confessed their crimes. This was not an easy path. Many demanded justice through punishment. But Mandela believed that facing painful truths and choosing forgiveness was the only way forward. Imagine carrying the burden of injustice, yet choosing to forgive those who harmed you. Mandela's example showed the world that forgiveness is not weakness, it is strength. This message resonated deeply, especially for viewers who have faced personal struggles or injustice. Mandela quickly became a symbol of freedom and human rights worldwide. He met with world leaders, spoke at international forums, and inspired countless activists. His presence reminded the world that the fight for equality was universal. Mandela championed causes from HIV/AIDS awareness to poverty eradication. He used his global stature to support other struggles for justice. Mandela's presidency lasted only one term. He voluntarily stepped down in 1999, setting a powerful example of humility and leadership without greed. After leaving office, Mandela focused on philanthropy, education, and peace. He established the Nelson Mandela Foundation to promote social justice and human rights. Despite health struggles, Mandela remained active, traveling the world to inspire future generations. Countless stories emerged of people whose lives were transformed by Mandela's courage. From young activists in the United States to community leaders in Europe, his life story served as a beacon of hope. Mandela's journey teaches us about the power of courage in the face of fear, patience through struggle, compassion for enemies, hope when all seems lost. Imagine if Mandela had chosen to surrender to despair in prison, if he had abandoned the fight after decades behind bars, if he had chosen revenge instead of reconciliation. The world today would be vastly different. This reflection invites the audience to consider their own challenges. Will they persevere or give up? For the USA audience, Mandela's story echoes deeply. His struggle parallels America's own journey through civil rights, racial justice, and equality. Mandela's peaceful resistance, combined with steadfast courage, offers lessons to continue fighting injustice in all forms. Nelson Mandela's life calls on each of us to be agents of change. Whether in our communities, workplaces, or families, we have the power to stand up against injustice, promote forgiveness and healing, work tirelessly for equality and dignity, inspire others by example. Your actions, no matter how small, contribute to a better world. As Mandela said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." Let his journey remind you, no struggle is too great, no obstacle insurmountable. You have the strength to change your world, just like Mandela changed his. After stepping down as president in 1999, Nelson Mandela didn't retreat from the world stage. Instead, he embraced a new role, that of a global elder and humanitarian. He dedicated himself to causes close to his heart, fighting HIV/AIDS, promoting peace, and advancing education. In South Africa, HIV/AIDS was devastating communities, and Mandela used his voice to break taboos and stigma, urging compassion and awareness. He worked tirelessly to encourage leaders and ordinary people alike to confront the epidemic with honesty and care. Mandela's influence transcended borders. He took on difficult diplomatic missions, mediating conflicts in Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and beyond. World leaders sought his counsel, valuing his wisdom forged through struggle and forgiveness. Mandela showed that true leadership means lifting others up and working for peace, even after personal sacrifice. Yet in his later years, Mandela's health began to decline. He battled respiratory infections and other ailments but remained mentally sharp and emotionally strong. His final public appearance during the 2010 FIFA World Cup hosted in South Africa was a moment of immense pride for the nation and the world. Standing tall despite frailty, Mandela symbolized resilience and hope. On December 5, 2013, Nelson Mandela passed away at the age of 95. The news triggered a global outpouring of grief and celebration of his life. From the White House to the streets of Johannesburg, millions paid tribute. Leaders from every continent gathered in South Africa to honor a man who had become more than a political figure, a universal symbol of justice and humanity. Nelson Mandela's legacy lives on in countless ways. South Africa's democracy and constitution reflect his vision of equality. His story inspires activists worldwide fighting oppression. Educational programs and foundations continue his mission. Statues, schools, and streets bear his name as reminders of his sacrifice. Mandela's journey from prisoner to president teaches us that no one is defined by their circumstances but by their choices. His life urges us to believe in the impossible, fight injustice with dignity, embrace forgiveness, keep hope alive even in darkness. His message is timeless, relevant for each viewer today, especially for those who face hardship, injustice, or doubt. So, what will you do with Mandela's legacy? Will you stand up when injustice calls? Will you forgive when it hurts? Will you keep walking your long road when the night seems endless? Remember, change begins with one person's courage. Be that person. Thank you for watching this in-depth story of Nelson Mandela, a man who changed the world with his courage, his heart, and his relentless pursuit of justice. If his story inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe. Together, we can honor Mandela by carrying forward his dream of a just and compassionate world.